you don't really give Donald Trump any excuses, do you? You're not a person who covers up for Donald Trump and the level of affiliation he has with the Israeli lobby. Can you clarify and go through with us slightly on that subject?
Yeah, because he's the president of the United States. He's not the prime minister of Israel. He is supposed to be the leader of our country, which is America. He is supposed to represent Americans and the best interests of Americans. And in fact, he has weaponized his entire administration against Americans and against America. It's the most anti-American administration of my lifetime, certainly. And as you look back historically, I think since JFK was assassinated, much like Charlie Kirk was, which I understand that you want to talk about that, I think that it's been the most anti-American administration since JFK. So no, the leader of the free world, the guy who purports to be the president of the United States, the commander-in-chief of our military, he doesn't get the luxury of escaping accountability. As a matter of fact, I think that you would be derelict in your duties as an American if you're not holding these people accountable. They are servants of the public, but with Trump, there's been this kind of atmosphere of idolatry that goes along with Trump. Trumpism is kind of a cult. And, technically speaking, could be identified as a cult when people are willing to overlook some of the most heinous, most disgusting betrayals and broken promises and, reneging on positions and critical campaign issues that he has completely forgotten about, maybe intentionally, maybe not, maybe he has a gun to his head. To me, it doesn't matter. You are the president of the United States. The buck stops with you. And it started my accountability with him during Operation Warp Speed. And I actually got phone calls from people that were close to Trump. And I was promised, proximity to Trump's orbit and that I would be invited to Mar-a-Lago, that I could report from the White House, that I could be deeply connected to the administration. And this is, by the way, at the time where the height of Donald Trump and being close to him was like, it was like a fantasy for so many people that were in my position. They would do anything to have that access. And for me, it was like I was being asked to go easy on Trump. Hey, would you just back off on the shots just a little bit? No, I won't. I won't capitulate. I will not negotiate. My kids are under attack. My country's under attack. My people are under attack. My faith, my religion, my spirituality, my convictions, my principles, my morals, my values, they're all under attack. And we are watching people literally die and drop dead at the peak of their physical condition and are being subjected to next level psychological programming and brainwashing and indoctrination, gaslighting, and the hubris and the arrogance and the lockdowns and the masking and the shots. No, I was just unwilling to capitulate. And as we move forward now into this 47th administration, and we look at some of the policies, both domestically and abroad, that Trump has enacted, some of his day one executive actions that he took to crack down on anti-Semitism, to stifle free speech. This is a guy who was supposed to be the victim, of the very people that have been attacking us. This is supposed to be the guy that was going to be the warrior that so many people believed was going to ride in on this white horse and save our country. And, he was so anti-censorship and, he was the president of peace and he was going to end all of these wars and he was going to build a merit-based economy in our country rather than a DEI, affirmative action-based economy where people are rewarded for being black or brown or gay, and in fact, it's just been completely the opposite. So, no, I think Trump is anti-American. I think that Trump is responsible for the ethnic cleansing and genocide and mass murder of a lot of Americans by Operation Warp Speed, which he still touts today as one of his greatest accomplishments. And, when you watch the business associates and personal associates of Donald Trump, you could talk about Howard Lutnick, Larry Ellison, Larry Fink, Jeffrey Epstein, Paolo Zampoli. You could talk about Miriam and Sheldon Adelson, his slavery that $230 million they've paid collectively just from the Adelsons to make sure that this guy was installed. And when you start to realize these things and you start really looking at these things, it becomes very obvious what Trumpism is all about. And that is that they knew that it would be easy to prey on somebody who has a love for money. It would be easy to prey on somebody who has a lust for women, particularly younger women. And so when somebody's involved in the real estate business or ventures like President Trump has been involved with for a very long time, and you look at who holds his notes, when you combine all of these different factors together, it's easy to see that this guy was captured without any kind of resistance, because all of the notes that he holds on all of his properties are held by these private equity firms and, Jewish powers. If they were to raise his interest rates by just a couple of basis points, or even a quarter of a basis point, they could bankrupt all of his industries. God only knows what he's done on tape. Unthinkable acts, I would imagine that he's very significantly implicated in the Epstein files. That's not a secret anymore, because we've all been watching the 180 that he did on this. Jeffrey Epstein, who? Like, why are we asking about this guy still? And Trump has always been in the business of procuring young women. He did it for his pageants. Well, he did Erica Kirk, which I'm sure that we're going to get to. She won, Miss Arizona USA in a Trump pageant. She was introduced to Charlie Kirk by either Donald Trump himself or somebody in his orbit. And now, all of a sudden, this Howard Lutnick, who was neighbors with Jeffrey Epstein, is showing up behind Donald Trump. He's his right-hand man. He is the AIPAC handler. He is what I refer to as the little Jew man in the corner that basically keeps him in check. He's his handler. And this guy was next door neighbors to Jeffrey Epstein. So this guy has been captured financially. He's been captured via blackmail. He's been captured economically. And he's been captured spiritually, as I understand that he actually even converted to Judaism. And he sold his daughter off to Jared Kushner. This is a very compromised, very captured individual, which has led to the complete occupation, not just of our Congress and our Senate and our courts, but now of the White House and the Oval Office and his entire cabinet. Howard Lutnick is the guy that put all of the prospective Trump nominees in front of a panel that were delivering Israeli loyalty tests. And so when you were getting confirmed or being considered for confirmation to Trump's cabinet or administration, you had to swear your allegiance to this foreign nation state. And I'm just tired of it. I'm tired of being lied to. I don't want my country ruled over by a foreign nation. I don't want my people ruled over by a foreign people. And I don't want my presidents and my elected representatives to be compromised by this type of blackmail or crimes of moral turpitude or bribery. I think it's disgusting. So Trump is the worst of the worst, actually. And that hurts because I'm a huge supporter of Donald Trump. When 2015 rolled around and he came down that escalator, I was not unlike a whole lot of other people, millions of people, where I was like, wow, this is a breath of fresh air. This guy is breathing into the stratosphere, the things that we have all been thinking. This is a system that's weaponized against us. This is a bureaucracy that has unleashed unrestricted warfare upon us. And the people on the news are not talking about the things that we're discussing at our dinner table. And I feel dispossessed of my country, and I feel disenfranchised as an American. And I feel like I've been screwed over and left for dead and forgotten at every turn. And I feel that my country is at the brink of being completely conquered. And at the time, it was it was the polarization of the two-party representative constitutional republic that Americans have been programmed to believe actually exists in this country. And so it was always really easy to blame the other side, to blame the radical left. And I identify as a Republican, a conservative, the red guy, and the Christian, and, the pro-America, pro-freedom, pro-individual liberty. I was against wars until I wasn't, when I was cheering on the idea of bombing sand people so that Sharia law wouldn't be forced upon me and my children. And, I fell victim to the same media programming and indoctrination and gaslighting and brainwashing that so many tens of other millions of Americans were. And so I was told that this was the human hand grenade that was going to be thrown into the political system, and that this entire thing was going to be blown up. And finally, somebody that understood what it was like to be a persecuted American who was being dispossessed of his country was going to be somebody that could be actually a viable candidate in this political apparatus in our country. And I supported it wholeheartedly. And when he came down that escalator and he was calling people names and he was saying funny things and he was calling out the news media for being the fake news, I was a huge supporter. And then, when he was elected, everybody celebrated. He was the guy that was the underdog that defeated all of the odds, that, the system that was rigged and stacked against him. And, he defeated Hillary Clinton, and finally she was going to get locked up and we were going to start seeing justice. And none of these promises were ever fulfilled. And the longer that you waited, the more it seemed like you were just being told to sit back and just trust the process and trust the plan. And the more I waited, the more agitated I became. And then when, of course, COVID came around and the lockdowns ensued and Operation Warp Speed happened, and I started to see all these things happening, it didn't take long to figure out who he's beholden to, who the puppeteers are, who the paymasters are, and who has him captured. And so, it's that control structure, or it's that, I guess, enslavement of our president, and by extension of all the American people, that I've really been fighting and kind of railing against for the last several years, which has it's become controversial for some reason. I don't know why that would be. It just seems odd to me that an American speaking on behalf of American freedom and prosperity and national security, and the dislike for pedophilia and pornography and degeneracy and perversion, the disdain that I have for an economic system that's designed for middle-class Americans to utterly fail, while the top 1% collectively holds more wealth than the entire middle class combined. I just, I don't know why it's controversial to want better for my country or for my people. Why it shouldn't be
well, part of it would be
paid in the political process and actually have a voice and a determining, be a determining factor in the political future, societal future, spiritual future of our country that we're going to leave for our children. And I don't think that should be controversial at all.